So the last time we heard from Sir David Spiegelhalter at the MRS conference, we were discussing the statistics of sex. Well, quite a lot's changed since then, but who better to guide us through and make the sense of the statistical data around COVID-19 than the Winton Professor of the Public Understanding of Risk in the Statistical Laboratory at the University of Cambridge. So, David, welcome back to conference.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to be here again.
Now, in the last 12 months, both journalists and, well, everyone else as well, I guess, have looked at people like you to help make sense of what has been a stressful, it's a disorientating situation that we're in. How has the experience been for you?
It's been very strange because I'm a statistician and normally people don't take much notice of statisticians. That's why they have to write books about sex or something just to be able to get some laughs out of people. And so, I'd retired and I was just looking forward to a gentle decline into my allotment. And then suddenly this came along and the enormous demands. It used to be that if I got an invitation to go on Newsnight, this was just the most, amazing thing. But now, I have to turn down almost every invitation because otherwise I could spend the whole time yapping, being a pundit on TV or radio or for newspapers. There's an endless demand for punditry. And so this is one of the lessons I and other statisticians and other scientists have had to learn is how to deal with this, in a sense, popularity. Suddenly it's a seller's market. We can call the shots to quite a large extent in the way that we couldn't before. And that's been a very interesting experience.
Yes, I did actually switch on the radio this morning and I thought, oh, hang on, there's David. So I guess it must be quite exhausting. And the temptation, I suppose, is just to go on absolutely everything. And then you might lose control of precisely what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think I was a bit like that at the beginning, but it just gets too stressful and too, it's just too much and it's embarrassing. So I go through little waves of it, really. And the extraordinary thing is that I kind of feel, it's a seller's market. I get lots of invitations coming in a way that I never did before. I can turn them down. But it does mean, though, that you don't have to control yourself. And, in a way, you are at the whim of what producers and researchers feel like having on their program, where they feel like having you. And that's why I love Twitter, actually, to be honest. I really like it. Because it's the chance to actually do the media stuff yourself and get it out there, to do your own self-promotion of your ideas, your book, whatever. And my followers have shot through the roof. And, and I find that, it's sort of equalizing. You're not just a total sort of, you're not just receptive, you're not a placid individual in the whole media world. You can actually go out there and put stuff out, and then it might get nibbled on and picked up by the media. So I've had to become a bit savvy in this area. But can I tell you, the really big thing that I talk about with statisticians and scientists is this whole business of being pulled outside your area of expertise.
Yeah.
And I've had to learn the hard way after making, a number of, stupid comments or just being pulled out. Well, what do you think of this? I'm feeling I should give an answer. No, I've completely learnt now. I just say, no, not talking about that. I haven't got a clue. And it got to a lovely stage on the Today program with Nick Robinson is awful. He's fine, but he always sticks in a question at the end that you weren't briefed for, no preparation, and he puts it in there. And the first time that happened, I was quite nonplussed and tried to answer it. No, next time, say, no, Nick, sorry, haven't got a clue. You'll have to ask somebody else. And then he said, well, what about Dominic Cummings? He said, I mean, just fell about laughing because of this. And I just said, look, I have learned that the thing, one thing you should do is stick to what you know about and shut up about everything else. And that is tricky. It is tricky a bit, particularly because I'm a statistician. I deal with statistics. Okay, And you'd think, well, that's pretty straightforward. No, I hadn't realized that nobody understands what statistics are. So they'll ask you about how do people feel about the numbers and the risks. So I'm not a psychologist. They'll say about, well, what about the chances of catching it off surfaces? And I don't know that. I'm not an infectious disease expert. Oh, well, what's going to happen in the future? So I don't know that either. I'm not an epidemic modeler. so I realize people's frustration at not knowing the questions to ask. I once, Vanessa Feltz, she's great. I love going on her program. But at one point I had to say, could you ask me something I actually know about, please? And she took it very well, and we got on fine. But it is a lesson I've had to learn, some of the media are learning, just what statistics do. And basically, I just try to explain things. It's all. I haven't got a side. I haven't got an agenda. I'm not trying to say we should lock down more, go for zero COVID. I'm not saying, oh well, all this lockdown stuff, let's open up as quickly as possible. I haven't got any agenda whatsoever, except to try to use the data in the best way possible and to make that data publicly available in a clear and transparent way. That I do have a very strong agenda about. Yeah.
How do you feel that your fellow experts have been doing over the last 12 months?
I'm going to be a bit careful here. My fellow scientists and things like that. Some have done very well. I think others who do have agendas, they have clear ideas of what should be done and what policies should be put in place. And that's fine. That's fine. But I do think, we've all got our opinions about things. Actually, I haven't got much of an opinion. I genuinely haven't got a clue what should be done most of the time. I really haven't. So I'm glad I haven't got any authority or in charge of any or, responsibility. And so I do respect people. Individuals have got a feeling about what should be done. And so I do respect that. But I kind of wish that they could, halfway through an interview, change a hat or change a tone of voice, or just remind us when they're going from, in a way, explaining the facts and discussing what's going on, the state of things, how things are, to what they think should be done. And it's when these all get mixed up together, I think it's very unfortunate. I think it's very unfortunate for the scientific community as a whole, and it's not good. I don't think it's good communication. And so I don't mind people should have opinion. If people have got agendas, absolutely fine. Just try to make it clear when you're moving from, in a way, the facts, well, such as they are, limited, to what you think should be done. And let's have a clear break. Yeah.
Do you have any heroes or villains in your mind for that?
Oh, I wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't talk about villains. If I'm talking about real scientists, I got some serious villains when it comes to, what I regard as purveyors of misinformation. But we could come on to that later.
We'll maybe come on to that a little bit later. But are you like the rest of us? Do you sometimes hear stuff on the radio or see something on the television and you think, oh no, want to scream or throw something at
I scream and I throw things. Well, maybe I try not to throw things. I scream and shout, literally scream and shout at the radio, and it hasn't stopped. And I suppose, what are the main ones? I suppose. To be honest, the golden oldies of horror stories is just the daily figures that come out every day. The number of deaths. Okay, so yesterday 221 or something like that. Why? Because it's a Sunday, and you always have very low figures on Sunday. The correct figure is probably about double that. And of course, nobody actually pays much notice. But then, by the time we get to Tuesday, it's going to suddenly shoot up. And so, this is there was a huge jump on Tuesdays between Monday and Tuesday, absolutely rocket. And then they'll report on Tuesday, this many people. And then some of them are still saying this many people have died of COVID in the last 24 hours. Okay, so that's fine. That's fine. I wonder, there's the numbers, except they didn't necessarily die of COVID, and they didn't die in the last 24 hours. Apart from that, the number is just fine. It's just shocking. For goodness sake, how many times? And it's because I think I've diagnosed the problem. The problem is it's news. 4 o'clock, everyone's on the dashboard, like I am, refreshing their screen, see the numbers pop up. I do it. And it's news. It's news. It's new. So it must be reported in the news. This is the number. And then maybe you'll get Hugh Pym or some correspondent coming on afterwards to explain, actually, this isn't the number. If we look at this, and then he talks about the trends and things like that. And it just drives me mental how, the news journalists still don't understand that. Well, first of all, the number is the number of people who had a positive test and then died within 28 days. Now, they didn't have to die of COVID. And if you last more than 28 days and then die with COVID, you don't count. And people now going into intensive care can be kept, even if they're going to die, they'll live longer than 28 days. So it's not counting very large number of these really sick younger people who die after going on ECMO or something like that. They're not counted. Now, it turns out, so there's an undercount and an overcount. And they roughly cancel out. Amazing. Like actually, that number for a while, for sometimes actually been tracking the actual number of people who have died. Not on the day of death, not the day of report. And so, fortunately, those numbers actually aren't bad at the moment. Not the day they're reported, but when you look at when they're actually attributed to the days people died. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. That still gets me screaming and shouting after a year.
Well, yes. Even though, given your frustration, though, people like Hugh Pym have put quite a lot of effort in over the last 12 months to doing these explainers about the figures. It's not just the BBC; other channels have done it well. But Hugh Pym's always there, standing in front of the wall that they do it in front of, and it's the 7-day averages and that sort of thing. Do you think that's rubbing off? Do you think, as a society, we're getting better at understanding what these figures mean, or are we stuck?
No, I think we have got a lot better. I think the media on the whole have done very well indeed. Certainly, certain groups particularly have really pulled out the stops. The BBC data team and the health team have been fantastic, I think. Financial Times, data journalism, incredible. Guardian's been good. And Spectator, there's been some really good data journalism going on there, with a lot of with critiquing and a huge number of explainers and things like that. I think they've done very well indeed. And for all whatever you think about the press briefings and some ghastly graphs that have gone up, they've got better now. But some absolutely horror stories of how not to communicate statistics. It does at least mean that the general public have realized that about line graphs. They've seen some terrible ones. Now, when they see some good ones, with proper labeling and very clearly laid out, that actually someone's thought about carefully, they'll recognize a good line graph. And in the past, we can't have line graphs in news. So I think that in many ways in which the media have done a fantastic job. And of course, what I'm talking about largely is the specialist journalists. The news journalists have tried, the political journalists have, it's not their job, for heaven's sakes. And when you get them trying to explain sensitivity and specificity of a diagnostic test, I just fall about laughing. But, that's really, that is a challenge to anybody.
But it is true. I mean, there is a problem, isn't there? That that there is this need to always act. If you're a news journalist, you have to report news. Yeah. If you're a politician, you have to make some kind of statement. Yeah. People are really always looking for something this. Yeah.
But that's why actually I actually feel touched and moved that the media are prepared to get people like me on who just there to try to explain what's going on. I'm not even going to say what's going to happen particularly. I certainly won't say what should happen. And I feel I'm really pleased that not just me, but other statisticians and other explainers, science explainers, have been given that platform. And I have to say, it seemed to be appreciated. I don't know if it shows one's appreciation by the fact that I do get some nice feedback. And the abuse is fairly limited. I think that's it's like, how do you know when your dog is happy? He stops biting me. It's how do you know that you're doing your job? It's when you don't get so much abuse.
The problem is there's so many people are looking for certainty, aren't they? And you have occasionally, I've heard you have the job of saying, well, we just don't know. And that's a very uncomfortable thing to hear, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's something I work in with my team at the Winton Centre for Risk and Evidence Communication. We're obsessed with uncertainty communication. And this has become absolutely central. And I think, again, people have got a lot better at it. You know, people like Chris Whitty, right from the beginning, were extremely good at it. He is so uncertain. And I've been listening to, I now kind of listen to him. Neil Ferguson did a podcast recently. It was just a whole stream of uncertainty, you know, all his expressions, his caveats, his language, all to do with how uncertain things were. I thought it was very good. And these are very good lessons of how to do it. And our research suggests very strongly that if you are in a way confident about your uncertainty, not apologetic, saying, well, this is the maximum we can, we just cannot know this. Your audience does not lose trust in you. You know, even better if you can quantify your uncertainty, but that's not always possible. So there's it's clearly a strong feeling among many people still that we have to be certain. Oh, if we're not certain, nobody will believe us, nobody will trust us. No, that's, as far as we can see, that's completely wrong. You know, you've obviously got to demonstrate, well, what we would say all the time is that the main thing is to demonstrate trustworthiness. I can go on about this for ages. Strongly influenced by philosopher Honora O'Neill, who did her Reflectors on Trust years ago, which is still unbelievably valuable read. Everybody should be forced to read that once a month. And she emphasizes, being a philosopher of Kant, that it's not to do with how can I get myself trusted. It's how can I demonstrate trustworthiness? In other words, you have an ethical duty to do this. How can I demonstrate trustworthiness? It's particularly important to statisticians who are just pumping out stuff all the time, telling facts and numbers and things like that. And that's why the Code of Practice of Statistics in this country, which is, to be honest, not a riveting read, but it's a terribly important document. Its first pillar is trustworthiness. Then there's quality and value, but trustworthiness. And if you look at Office of Statistics regulation, and I got a conflict of interest here. Now, I am now a non-executive director of the UK Statistics Authority, which oversees the work of the Office for National Statistics and the Office for Statistics Regulation. So I would say this, wouldn't I? But they, you know, when they're writing in letters to people, now you've got to notice the language is very careful. It's always to do with this is not trustworthy communication of statistics. So it's become and I don't think it's just a bland phrase. I think it really means something. And we're working out, you know, little checklists for trustworthiness for communication. I think it's something that it's had a profound effect on me. In what I suppose what I try to do, and certainly what I recommend for others.
There is a problem, isn't there? I mean, I know, because I've dealt with the ONS many times, and they're extremely diligent, very, very careful people. There are some statistics that are just really very hard to explain to non-specialists, especially when you only have a limited time or a limited amount of their attention, isn't it? How do you demonstrate trustworthiness when you're in that situation?
Well, in a sense, you know, I mean, again, Honora O'Neill has got it really off to, and she's very good at sound bites. And she says that if you're communicating information, and it may be complicated information, there's a number of things you should do. You should make sure that, you know, the information is accessible, that people can find it if they want to. You've got to make sure it's comprehensible. Now, I mean, that's tricky, but to the extent that's necessary. But you should check it. I mean, if you're just baffling people, you're not being trustworthy if people haven't got a clue what you're talking about. And it's going to be usable. It's going to answer their concerns. That again means that it has to be phrased in a way that addresses their concerns, even if you don't think their concerns are right. You know, people might be concerned about vaccines for all sorts of reasons. You've got to address those concerns. You don't say, "Oh, don't be so stupid." No, you know, this is serious. People are worried about it. You have to address that. And then the final one is that it's got to be accessible. And I really like this. This means that if somebody wants to, and of course most people won't, they've got to be able to check your working. Okay. You've got to be able to see where this stuff comes from. You can't just expect it to be taken on trust. For most people, it will be quite right, because who's got time or the effort or the skills to do that? But somebody, whether they're a fact-checking organization or NGO, anybody should be able to get it there and find out where you got that number for. Or if you're like they're more or less, or some media people, they should be able to get at it. And that's a lovely checklist. I go through that in my mind. I wag my finger at people if they break one of those things, because it contains in it, I really like this usable idea. It's something this business of listening, the idea of communication because in your trade all the time, you have to listen. You don't just communicate blah. You have to find out, and that's what your this work of this organization is, which is absolutely wonderful, because you have to know the audiences, you have to know their concerns, and you've got to treat them with respect. And so that's it's very nice to have, and this is so much due to Nora Neal, that to have all these ideas, which sound a bit nebulous, brought down to some basic core principles, and ethical, duty-based principles that I think are have, as I said, profoundly affected me in my work, and which I then bang on to everybody else about as well.
Yes. How well do you think the authorities are doing in producing enough detail in statistics at the moment?
Varies hugely. I think ONS, I would say this, ONS have done an extremely good job. They've been unbelievably flexible, and the whole infection surveys, massive change in how they're doing everything. Very good. Public Health England started off, their dashboard was terrible, and now it's brilliant. Very good. You can download the data. It's an API. You can download. So I just click on the thing. Down comes the data. I produce my own graphs. I've got them all done by 4:05. I mean, it's fantastic. So excellent. You heard me on the radio this morning complaining bitterly about the lack of availability of data about the vaccine rollout. I mean, it's shocking, absolutely shocking. I mean, I'm sure this probably will be sorted out, but it's actually got worse since January. I mean, we don't have that detail available to know how things are getting on. We get some big figure, 17 million been done, and some detail, but nothing like enough to really understand what's going on in different parts of the country, with different communities, in the different priority groups, and so on. And I think the amount people are sacrificing at the moment. There's an absolute right to demand data about what's going on, so that we can see it, and it's not just government holding it to themselves and then allowing little bits to be dribbled out when they feel like it. So you can tell I feel very strongly about this. I do. This is my agenda. This is what I am prepared to rant on and on about, because I do believe that that information should be just put there, and then see what happens. See, it's people, will tell you. Open data is I think a deeply important and ethical, principle for government.
Talking of people with strong feelings, I think many of us will have had an occasion when there's been a family member or a friend who's come out with something, and you think that is insane, and you have to try and argue them down from it. But it's surprisingly difficult, isn't it, in the moment? Got any tips for us?
Well, in a way, I kind of feel it's not my job, but especially not dealing with your family and your strange.
It's okay.
Uncle Jim, who believes COVID is a hoax and this sort of stuff. We've all got them, and it's difficult. I mean, this is psychology, really. I can talk some principles about it. I think that are general, but in terms of those things I understand about people. I mean, personally, I just get angry, but I know that's not good. That's not good. Finally, you got to have empathy. You got to see with their concerns, and there's a lot of people in this country, I think, especially what I regard as middle-aged men, who just feel this is wrong, who don't like it. They don't like what's going on. And almost rather childishly, they want to stamp their foot and say, it's not right, it's not fair, so it can't be true. Therefore it's all a conspiracy and it doesn't exist. It's all unnecessarily, we don't need lockdown, and it would go away anyway, and there's going to be no second wave, and all the tests are false positives, and this is a case demic, and all this nonsense that's been just shown to be wrong. So that's been going on the whole time. I used to get annoyed. Now they're so clearly wrong, most of this stuff, that I don't bother with it anymore, and I certainly don't bother to argue with it anymore. So I think, okay, we got slightly off the subject of how do you deal with Uncle Jim, who thinks it's a hoax. But I think, in the end, you'll probably be unable to persuade him, and just like people with deeply ingrained views. So the first thing is to make sure that he doesn't influence anybody else. Just try to cocoon him, to try to isolate him from other people, so not to, and I think, in the nicest possible way, to point out where he might have gone wrong. Now I think one of the best counter arguments I've seen is Christopher Snowden, who's, normally he works for, right-wing libertarian think tank, essentially, and he's an outspoken critic of Public Health England and the nanny state and things like that. But he has turned into a real critic of what you might call the lockdown skeptics and their misuse of statistics and data. And he is brilliantly spent a lot of time really pulling them apart. Now, there's somebody who you might think would agree with them. And he says it because I don't like lockdown, I don't like it. But the evidence, these people are so, reasoning so badly and misusing evidence, and that upsets him. Just because he criticizes what he regard as sort of nanny state people for misusing evidence about the effects of sugar and alcohol and things like that. So he has a go at these people. And I think that's quite a good argument. I point, when I get stuff sent to me, I point them to him because he's, in a way, on their side normally to some extent. He's not a zero COVID, person who, who someone might think I don't identify with those individuals at all.
Yes. Do you think overall that what we've learned in this last 12 months is going to lead to more evidence-based policy making? The government's gone from talking about being sort of, following the data now. Do you think they really are going to follow the data more in future?
I think so. I think they have. I think they will. I really do. I think that this has shown, Boris Johnson's got a dashboard on his desk apparently now, something like that. So I think this is going to change things a lot. There is a move within the within the whole civil service, the integrated sort of data platform, we're bringing data sets together, merging them, providing dashboards for policymakers and things like that. I think this is pushing. There's now a data masterclass for senior civil servants. I've helped a little bit with that, and there's being rolled out, and that seems to be going very well. So things that were, a lot of this, of course, is what Dominic Cummings wanted to push. It's his agenda to a large extent that's being implemented. To which I think we should all be very grateful for pushing that idea of the importance of data in government, and all that COVID has done is, like so many things like home working and things like that, it's just accelerated this at a pace that would be unthinkable. So I do believe that there will be, I think this is going to have a fundamental change in the attitudes to data and evidence. Yeah. There is a good thing.
There is nonetheless, there is still, data will take you only so far, won't it? Yeah. There is still room for politics.
I was ranting on, usually on the radio this morning about people saying, it used to be follow the science, and that's to follow the data. And I said, well, God, don't follow the data. Data does not tell you what to do. Come on, it does not tell you what to do. It does not speak. I always in my book, which I should have copied, to plug. The quote I used right at the beginning is from Nate Silver, The Signal and the Noise. Data does not speak for itself. We imbue it with meaning. And this idea that somehow, it's just the most crass idea you can think of. That if you've got lots of data, it'll offer up its secrets through some, mystical, process. No, data does not tell you what to do at all. So, but I wouldn't want to make decisions without it, but it doesn't tell you what to do. So I think that's, again, will be clear to anyone with any sense.
Okay. We just got about a minute to go, David. So we've talked a lot about the bad news that we've had over the last year, and fair enough, there's been a lot of it. But do you think that there's any good news in all of this that's been underreported? You got any good news for us, is what I'm asking.
Oh, God, I didn't know. The good news everyone knows about is the fact that the vaccine, the development, the procurement and the rollout has been a staggering success. Envy of the world. I know, and not just that, but the decision making behind it, not just by the vaccine task force that was done so well, but the fact that the prioritization program and the decision to approve the AstraZeneca for the over 65s, even though it's limited testing on them, and to go from a 3-week to a 12-week gap, all these were evidence-based decisions, bold, courageous decisions made by scientists, as far as I can see, without political interference. There must have been some, I'm sure there was some behind the scenes, but with them fronting it, and they've stuck to it, And these were the right decisions. But they were bold because both of those were decisions in which there was not direct evidence for what they were doing. It's just there was no evidence against it and quite a lot of background knowledge to support what they were doing. And what's interesting is that, people say, oh, we've got to be precautionary. And other countries have said, oh, we can't do this because we've got to be precautionary. No, they have completely misunderstood the precautionary principle. The precautionary principle says, you shouldn't, well, there's lots of different ways of wording it. So there's no such thing as one precautionary principle. But if, you've got to, by doing so, you're going to save lives by a particular action, pretty well certain, then you need evidence, strong evidence for not doing that action. So I feel that that for me is, I don't think that's been trumpeted enough. The good news about that bit of decision making, which is a fixed objective. We're going to maximize the number of lives saved. We're going to have a queuing system, no jumping the queue, no politics about who gets the vaccine first. This is the prioritization. It's based on an algorithm. I was one of the team that drew up, did the risk algorithm on the likelihood of dying in the first wave. And so that's something I think has not been appreciated quite enough. And again, which I find actually quite moving, the fact that this group of people in the back room came up with these courageous, bold, controversial decisions, and they were right.
Well, David, we could talk about this all day, but
you can tell I can, yeah.
Yeah, well, yes, yeah. Enjoy your retirement.
As if, yeah.
David, thank you ever so much. I imagine you probably have to go now because Newsnight's probably calling, but thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you very much.